Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we have a pretty interesting market topic to discuss. Are there too many Pokemon cards printed? This was by far the most frequently asked question I received in the Patreon Q&A. Not only are there too many Pokemon cards printed, is what we're experiencing right now similar to the 90s sports bubble? So I think a good starting point for this conversation is there are more Pokemon cards printed today than probably any point in time. The easiest way to illustrate this is if we look at the pop report for something like the Mega Full Art Charizard PSA 10 versus the Champions Path Charizard PSA 10. There's only a difference there about 100 copies. I think Evolutions is 2,800-ish. Champions Path is like 2,700-ish. But the big key point there is that Evolutions is 4 years old. Champions Path is 4 months old. So you can tell right away that there are more cards not only printed, but graded, traded, you name it. There's just more cards out there today than pretty much any point in time. And don't get it twisted, Evolutions is not a scarce set by any stretch of the imagination. Evolutions has been steady, available, / in print for like 3 generations. So that just really hammers this point home, how much product is being printed and released in such a short period of time. So quick history lesson on the 90s sports bubble for those who aren't aware. What happened back then is in the mid to late 80s, you had this resurgence in interest for sports. People came back in just like they did in Pokemon in 2016 with Evolutions, Pokemon Go, even 2020. Any of these re-entry points, pick your poison. It's the same process in the 80s. You had people getting into their careers. They have this disposable income and they want to chase that experience they had when they were younger. It's no different than what's happening today in that general broad sense. Keep it in context because we're about to delve into this nuance here. What is fundamentally different in sports is in the early 90s, something happened in Pokemon happened in sports that has yet to happen in Pokemon, and I doubt it ever will. In the early 90s, after this demand really was full steam, Upper Deck looks over at Topps and they're like, you think what I'm thinking? They look over at Fleer, they're like, yeah, you think what I'm thinking? They look over at Score, they're like, you think what I'm thinking? All these companies at the same time not only started printing more product, they started doing more variants and more sets like Black Diamond, Collector's Edition, Refractor, all that type of stuff. That's when you started to see the rookie patch autos. That's when patches started to exist, was in that time. Not only did you have multiple companies printing product, they also had like more umbrellas and more sets. It's just like a never-ending amount of product. That's why today a lot of this early 90s stuff really didn't grow, if move at all. The only things that did are those limited items like the RPAs, the really good players, star players, rookie cards, things like that. It's more of an exception. Where majority of that 90s stuff is still stagnant because they printed a metric ton, literally and figuratively. Now, if we take it to Pokemon, the biggest difference is Pokemon is printed by one entity, Nintendo. That's who does it. So whether you're printing as much Champions Path as you want, if you're printing this box over here, that upside down box right there, it's all the same product from one set, from one company. It's not like, oh, here's Champions Path Black Diamond Edition with the Black Diamond Charizard. Please don't do that, Pokemon. Or here's like the RPA of Charizard, or the collector, whatever version. It's not like that. Even within those categories now, you have more branches, splitting out, like the red refractor, blue refractor. There's just so much going on in sports. And at the end of the day, it's a very small amount that really stood the test of time, where Pokemon's different. Going back to Evolutions, Evolutions had a ton of product released. From 2016 until now, you had so much product released from distribution all the way to retail, just a ton. And yet it's already increased in price, where majority of these 90 sets still to this day have not increased in price over 30 years ago. So there's your quick data. But again, the big takeaway here is that these sports companies, there's numerous of them printing it. The best way to really drive this home is like, if it were similar to Pokemon, it would be like if the NHL was the only one that made hockey cards, or like the NBA was the only one that made, basketball cards and so on. Where in Pokemon, that's how it is. If anything, the benefit of Pokemon being really strict with their IP and like really anal retentive is that they probably won't negotiate and throw that license around, like WotC did or previously before Nintendo owned it or took over in like 03, 04. That's unprecedented. It has yet to happen with Nintendo owning it. So that's the biggest fundamental difference, is that back in the 90s, why that bubble happened and why it burst is because that organic demand that was there was just completely saturated by all this product that people just simply didn't want. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, I hear that, but still, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? There's so many rippers, flippers. now it's called scalper. Before it was, flipper. Before that it was reseller. There's a new rebrand every couple of years. They like tilt the hat a different direction. Team Rocket's got a new fit every generation. At the end of the day, the difference with Pokemon is they're printing into demand. They're printing to demand. Case in point, there's a lot of people who go to their store, Target or whatever, even why the term scalper or flipper is a thing, why people complain about it, is because when they go to their store, they can't get the cards. That's why you see so much of this product being rushed out. There's so many rushed reprints right now because Pokemon is desperately trying to keep up to the demand. And so far, they haven't caught it. How many Hidden Fates, like revolving door reprints, talk about this all the time on Patreon. It's like a never-ending revolving door. Like, here you go. Here's some Hidden Fates. Here's another one. Here's a tin. Here's a ETB. It's just like one after the other because they're just trying to keep that supply chain flowing because it has yet to meet demand. And of course, demand can change. That's the thing that we're also going to talk about here. We're going to try to look at both angles, cover both perspectives. I'm always a proponent of how demand can change, rarity cannot. Demand is more subjective. Some people can grow up with Pokemon and they go to high school, start popping their collar, start liking girls, thinking they're a cool guy, and they don't mess with Pokemon, and then later on they come back to it. That's definitely a thing that can happen. And a lot of things happen to people where more important changes in their life happen. They go a different direction. The market is very dynamic, it's in motion. Therefore, demand is subjective. Demand has an ebb and flow going on all the time, and you see that in the price trajectory of items. That's why markets are always in motion, because demand's always in motion. But rarity is not. And I think that's where a lot of people are worried right now. People who are worried are like, okay, well, I want the older rare mint or better for everything. But the converse to that, I think the best way to neutralize that is that this idea of flippers and scalpers, I tried to throw a positive spin, not to the people doing it, but to give a better understanding how markets work. Scalpers and flippers and all that stuff that are on the rise, this like the new Team Rocket villain, they're a symptom of demand. Like, they can only exist because something has a demand. So a good way to understand that is go to Target and skip the Pokemon aisle for a second, or just look at like the other stuff that isn't selling, okay? And try to buy like half or even majority of those toys or cards or whatever it is. Try to do that and then flip it immediately. You won't be able to because there isn't demand. So you really can't be a flipper. Those leeches have to leech on to something. And in this case, it is the demand of Pokemon that has yet to be satisfied. If Pokemon themselves sold directly or just had a better supply chain, because consistent supply chain, it would neutralize that little middle ground there. Team Rocket wouldn't have much of an identity. But again, they only exist because they're a symptom of demand. Because if that demand wasn't there, they'd be on to the next thing. They'd be back to the Chunky Dunkies. They'd be doing whatever new flip it is in sneakers or whatever's going on. That's what they'd be doing. Now, the bottom line here with Pokemon, I always love talking about. I could talk about this forever. When people talk about, is it some new thing? Is it the stimulus? Is it Logan Paul? Is it whatever the revolving door of like reasons? Is this why this is happening? Is it scalpers? Whatever identity, whatever thing it is they're pointing at. Pokemon was the highest grossing media franchise before all that noise, before all of it, before Logan Paul got in the scene, before people were calling flippers scalpers, before Champions Path existed, before a lot of this stuff, before 2020. Pokemon was already the highest grossing media franchise. And why I wanted to use this as like the last point to tie everything together. That wasn't true for sports. When you look at sports today, especially modern is a very, very optimized, like highly competitive financial outlet. I don't see a lot of guys that are like, yeah, I really like that X card, or, I really like this art. It's more about the history, right? With sports, like when I look over here, I got rookies off camera. It's about capturing that history, that season, that whatever it is. But now there's speculation on speculation on speculation. Like, is this the Zion rookie? Is this the one that's going to be the one out of the pool of 100 rookies? Is this the right refractor? Is this the right RPA? Is that the Jumpman logo that's, going to go from 10K and then a few years later it's going to go for over $1 million? That's what sports is. Sports is a very ultra optimized financial vehicle. Or with Pokemon, I would say Pokemon's core is always going to be collecting. I think that demand can have the financial aspect to it. It's always at play, right? Finance is always there. We're all buying these cards, we're all selling those cards. But I think a good way to really highlight the difference here is that if you go look at like sports stuff, if I go check like the pop for a lot of these sports cards, it's literally just the rookie and then nothing. Like it's like Giannis, Zion, and things like that, and then nobody. Like it's just barren. Even the older stuff too. Like I'm blown away. Like when I look at like Gretzky's OPG, like I look at the 79 OPG, there's not a lot of people really going for the full set like you would in first edition base. Like compare how comprehensive first edition base set is in Pokemon, like the first set, to like the first or the big major sets in sports. It's night and day. It's unreal how comprehensive first edition base is. Like people are trying to get all those cards. Like they're trying to gotta catch them all. It's not just gotta catch Charizard. It's not just gotta catch whoever. Blastoise, gotta always show some love for Blastoise. It's gotta catch them all. And that shows in the data. Like when you look at the pop report, people are trying to get every first edition base card. People are trying to put that binder together. Who's trying to put a binder together is modern sports. Like, let's be real. Like, I love sports just as much as I love, Pokemon and non-sports, but keep it real. No one's trying to do a binder of modern sports because it's really tough. It's like, which one of these 100 sets with these mixture variants do I choose? Because the identity is so much different. And that's what collapsed sports back then. Sports is doing more than fine today. But that's what made it have a downturn back then in the early 90s. Where with Pokemon, I don't think you can have that same identical trend because the core and the variables are so much different. Another idea to throw at you is like, I did a video the other day with the Tropical Wind, and I was like, yeah, to like that person out there who collects Hoppip, because like Hoppip was in the background of one of them. And I had multiple comments that are like, yeah, Jay Witz is a big Hoppip collector. And I'm like, this is Pokemon right here. It's like, there's people who will like collect the most niche, like you name the species. Like there's probably a Bidoof collector out there who like collects Bidoof or like Rattata. Like there's probably a collector for almost every single species in Pokemon. Where again, in sports, it's like that no-name guy that like rode the bench, and just made like the entry-level salary. Like no one's grading that card. No one's throwing that card in a binder. And in Pokemon, you do. So I think that's the fundamental difference. Of course, there's speculation in all of this. Don't hear that, don't get it twisted. That there's definitely speculators everywhere all the time. Like I said, anytime there's demand, this flipper, scalper, whatever you want to call it, is a symptom of that demand. It's in everything you do. Toys, shoes, collectibles, anything that can be bought and sold into demand, there's going to be that little like middle ground entity. So all I'm highlighting is that, yes, of course that exists, but I would definitely, being in both of these camps, having a foot in sports, having a foot in non-sports Pokemon for over a decade now, I see the stark contrast of perspective where sports is primarily finance, can I get that one of one? Can I get that whatever version variant? Because that's really all it's about. Or Pokemon, for sure, you really want to get that chase card, right? But there's plenty of people who just get excited. Like I just get excited if I get a good art, or like if I get a good, what you get usually a pull. Like even this amazing rare, perfect example. Like these new amazing rares, what do I like about it? The artwork, the design. I don't really care if it's super ultra mega rare. I just really, really like that design. And sure, the added rarity gives you another layer of challenge there, but it's not one of these like contrived, like red refractor, orange refractor, whatever thing it is that has this ultra optimized, finance market on top of that. It's a different ballgame. No pun intended. So it's got to catch them all. It's not got to catch the RPA. It's a different landscape. And I think that's a saving grace for Pokemon. Even in the most cynical perspective, I would always bet on that demand because I'm one data point for it, and I think a lot of people can really understand that. And I think that's the true motivation for why we're here, is we're chasing that experience of that gotta catch them all, rather than like, just trying to get that one card that's like super contrived from like the one of the 20 companies and the one of the 100 sets. So anyway, hopefully that addressed the question, and again was a good discussion topic. Like I said, this was like one of the most frequent questions I had in my Patreon Q&A, and it makes sense from I told everybody in Patreon, you have to make that a very vague comparison, because once you start getting into like the details, it's clear that there's a lot. Again, Pokemon is only done by Nintendo. It'd be like if the NFL was the only one who could do football cards, NBA was the only one who could do basketball, and of course it's not like that. Like sports is just like a never-ending amount of stuff being released. So there you go. As usual, the deal. Let me know how I feel. That's pretty much it, guys. Till next time.